of the way we use them, usually on portable devices. And, that's kind of the intention, I think, and why they started really producing them so people can plug them into their phones, use them on their iPads, and that's just a clunky, more unprofessional way of recording anyway, but it can get the job done. But they are getting better quality. Of the mics that I tested in the USB shootout, the Sennheiser MK4 was definitely the best one, and their non-USB version of that microphone is actually less expensive than the USB version of that same microphone.
Right.
So price points, it's becoming a little bit more scattered in that way, and not only that, but you can get a lot of really great sounding large diaphragm condenser microphones, at a fairly reasonable price point.
I'm wondering if you think that it's just a matter of time before we see like a U87 USB mic. And for the listeners at home, a U87 is a large diaphragm condenser mic that is sort of ubiquitous in most recording studios.
And also very expensive.
Yes.
Around the $3,000 price point in the US.
Yeah.
And I would say no. And here's the reason why. It's not because I don't think the technology can be good enough. I do. I think the technology can be outstanding. But the people who are going to be purchasing mics at that level, I would say 1,000 on up, they're going to want the freedom that comes with a mic that's not a USB mic, because they can pair the preamp individually. They can choose their converters. If one piece fails, they can quickly swap in another piece, just the piece that fails. It's just generally a more professional solution all around from a practicality standpoint to not use a USB microphone. Not saying you can't do professional work with a USB microphone, but if you're doing it day in, day out, it's a tool like you would find in any other job. And USB microphones are just a very simple tool, like a multi-tool.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go see a mechanic's not going to do much with a multi-tool. He or she will have an entire range of specialty tools so they can choose exactly the right piece for what they need.
I totally agree with that. And that's actually also a really good, way to illustrate that, that comparison. Absolutely.
So I'd like to go ahead and maybe bust a few myths right now. Now, my first statement / question here is, do you need an expensive mic to work professionally? And you both touched upon that a little while ago. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, the microphone, to me, is the third most with that microphone. And it's because they know what they're doing. So, that's the real issue lies is that when newer people to the business think that they can get away with a cheaper, less expensive microphone, they quickly realize that, they think it's a cheap microphone, but it's not really that part of it that's making them less effective. It's that they haven't had all the other stuff in between and a good quality room to work in.
Yeah. And would it be fair to say that the microphone in that list of 3 is a distant third as well behind those first 2? I mean, it's a long way down compared to the room and the performance. But sorry, Emmett, you were going to pick up on something.
As both of you know, and I think a lot of people know, I'm a big proponent of using quality gear. But as far as being absolutely necessary, not at all. The highest paying voice job I've ever done was a mic that I would never have chosen for myself if I had another option. So it's much more about the work and the performance, the room that it's in. At the same time, a good mic behind a good room and a good performance can make that performance easier or allow it to come through better, I guess is probably a better way to put it.
Shine.
Right. A great mic doesn't make a great performance. It will capture a bad performance or a good performance. But with all things created equal, if the performance is great, a great mic will capture it a little bit better.
There's a lot of hyperbole about the difference between an expensive mic and a cheap mic. I wonder is there any way to articulate in practice how much of an improvement, getting that U87 plugged in versus like an NT1, how much of an improvement that's going to make? Because it's not as much of a difference as a lot of people think it is.
It's pretty interesting. I feel like that in the last decade or so, we've seen a proliferation of lower cost microphones that do sound really good from major manufacturers, in addition to boutique manufacturers and guys who also will mod, cheaper microphones into more expensive sounding microphones. Yeah. So my feeling is that, you can certainly find, if you're willing to put in the time and the search and use your ears, to find the right combination. There are plenty of microphones out there that are around the $300 price point or so that you're not necessarily going to notice $700 worth of difference between that microphone and a $1,000 microphone. Yeah. There might be some differences, some subtle differences, but it may not be worth $700 of difference.
I agree completely. And I guess that $700 difference depends hugely on where you are in your career and how important those fine details are to you. There's the law of diminishing returns. The more you spend, the less the improvement. And once you get above a certain level, it just becomes about the flavor that you like or that your engineer likes, or even which one you think is the prettiest hanging in your room, because they're all very, very good.
Yeah.
And not to mention the fact that, guys like Emmett and myself and, we listen to microphones all day long, or certainly have, and we listen to, in a very critical listening environment, whereas most of the things that end up on air, are being listened to by people who don't care what the difference is, in how much you spent on a microphone. And they don't notice the difference between the two. And they're also listening on computer speakers or earbuds or in their car or on the television speakers, so they're not really paying attention. Now, one thing that I can certainly tell you from having, worked on some video projects and film projects is, people are willing to forgive, some poor quality video, but they tend not to forgive poor quality sound. So that is something that is important to keep in mind, because if something sounds bad, it's really hard to listen to and to maintain their attention, for a long period of time. Whereas if something is kind of poor video quality but has great sound, they'll still watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it drives me crazy sometimes that, for instance, as we progress along and, bandwidth and speed and things like that, a lot of companies have been focused on, getting better video quality. It's been a lot more recent than people have actually cared more about getting better sound quality.